Alright guys, well today is art class with Professor Turtlepig, and I am Professor Turtlepig. We are going to be kind of taking it all the way back to the beginning. But if you would like to participate, all that you need for today's a very simple one. Maybe a couple pieces of paper, or just a bigger piece of paper, and then any writing utensil. A pencil, some colored pencils, a pen might be difficult, but you can do a pen, a crayon, whatever you got, we can do it. Okay, so today, we are going to be talking about breaking things down, which is the very first lesson that I like to do. It's the very first thing that I like to discuss, and I think it's an important one to talk about. Yeah, I think it's an important one to talk about because it's kind of what everything else is kind of built upon. But before we kind of go into that, I wanted to chat a little bit about what to expect with things, right? So what are we planning on learning today with today's class? I want to teach the building blocks of how to do everything else in art. And it sounds kind of silly when we talk about it, what I end up talking about, but it's important to understand kind of where everything comes down to when it comes to illustration. And then more importantly, once we understand kind of those building blocks, we'll learn how to take kind of like a complex image and how to break it down and simplify it so that your brain can kind of process it in an easier way, and thus it's easier for you to recreate it and eventually to create things on your own, willy-nilly. Now, as far as what you should expect with this class, you should expect whenever you're making art, and especially whenever you're trying something new, and I feel like this goes for everything, but especially goes for art, when you're making something new, you should expect it to be goofy, right? You should expect some goofy shit. Why is my pen arm being stupid? Wait, hold on. There we go. Okay, good. So as far as what to expect, so expect what you're going to make. Don't expect to make like a museum quality anything, right? Expect to be goofy. Expect it to be goofy shit. Expect to stumble a lot. Expect to have some difficulty with it because we're starting all the way back at the beginning. What you're gonna make isn't going to be pretty. What I make isn't going to be the prettiest thing in the world. It just isn't, right? The point is to learn the process and to learn how to break things down. The point of today is not to make a museum quality lovely piece that you will hang up on your fridge, right? You will, however, expect to kind of like learn through things, and you're going to learn kind of like a potential pathway. The way that I do things isn't necessarily the only way that you could do it. In fact, it's absolutely not the only way that you can do things. So this is one way that you can break things down and get an understanding of how to start with art, but there's a bajillion different ways to do it. This is just my way and how I have found it possible to do things. So anyways, that's a little summation of what we will learn and what we can expect. Sometimes whenever you're starting to look and kind of like get an understanding of what's going on with art, you start it and you're like, oh, there's so much happening right now. Like, how can I possibly be expected to break this down, right? If you look at everything that's on the screen right now, obviously the Mona Lisa, there's some really pretty gradients going on in the background. You can see some landscapes in like this kind of neat, kind of like blurry-ish, kind of way. And as it gets kind of closer to the ground, you see like there's some man-made structures here. There's a bridge there. There's a winding path. There's mountains. There's things like that. And then you go into the full foreground and you see this fantastic, portrait. Is kind of what you see. You also see, Leonardo da Vinci in drag, which is super cool, which is neat. But you try and think it down, and you're like, all right, so what exactly am I seeing here? And for me, like, the main thing that I want to kind of like break down is kind of like the subject, right? What is the subject matter of this piece? And the subject of this is definitely, the Mona Lisa, right? And then so you take this Mona Lisa, and you're like, okay, cool. Well, I need to figure out, how to draw this part better, So how am I going to break down this figure better? And then you realize, you kind of look at it and you say, oh, well, you take a figure and you could break it down into simpler shapes, right? And so you see here, I kind of have like some of the wireframe or the framework of what, the Mona Lisa would look like, underneath everything. Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio in drag, absolutely. That's what this is. But here we have the framework, and so you see a person, is kind of made out of this weird head shape, which is kind of like a sphere, right? The top part of the head is kind of like a sphere with this kind of like bucket at the bottom of it that makes the jaw, that makes the mandible, right? You have a cylinder that makes your throat. You have like this kind of like big broad section, and then you have little globes making up your shoulders there, right? And so you take something that is like super intense. There's just so much going on, and you just really try your best to strip it down to its most rudimentary parts, right? And the process that we just did right there is essentially taking something from like a full form, breaking it down into shapes, and then you could break those shapes down even further into lines, right? And the way that I think about that, if it helps you to understand things a little bit better, if let's say the word, let's say, you like ducks, right? Do you guys like ducks? I like ducks. Do you like ducks? Right? So I like ducks. Okay. Ducks. D. Okay? So, essentially, whenever it comes to composing artwork, you can say an entire, beautiful piece of art is maybe like it's a story, right? It's a novel, it's a book, whatever, right? From that book, you can identify and break it down to different forms, different three-dimensional things, and I would say you could break those down into like paragraphs or sentences, right? Now, those sentences are composed of words, and those words are composed of letters, and that's essentially what you're doing whenever you're breaking down art pieces, right? Art pieces, you start with lines come together to create a shape, and shapes come together to make the forms, and then a whole ton of that is your art piece, right? So, this is all conceptual kind of stuff, but I think it kind of helps wrap the mind around, I feel like whenever people get started with artwork, they get so overwhelmed with the idea of like, I'm never going to be able to draw a person. Like, that's so complicated. And sure, a person is complicated, but like, a finger isn't particularly complicated. It's made up of 3 segments, and you can draw 3 segments pretty easily, right? And so that's kind of the idea of how to break everything down. So when we're talking about the basics of things, we have lines. So if you have a pencil and paper, I would love for you to practice doing this with me now. There's more or less just kind of 3 basic shapes of lines. There's going to be combinations of these and whatnot, but for the most part, you're going to see a straight line, like an I, a curved line, with like a full, like strong curve in it, like a C, or you're going to have kind of like a tipsy-turvy with a little bit of curves on both sides, like an S. So just real quick, I just want you to get used to the idea of drawing these kinds of shapes, right? So straight line, boom, boom. You can have some, whatever, and then curves with the S. There's different variations, right? There's some with like a little bit of curve, and there's some that are, obviously a lot more exaggerated, right? But there's different variations, and the C's, right? And the C's, just like with the S's, there's some that are very, very lightly, and some that are a little bit more intense, right? Now, don't take up a whole lot of room on your paper for this, but I just want to get you kind of in the practice of kind of doodling, getting your wrist and your hand and your fingers involved, right? Goodness. I'm gonna have to edit out all of my adult jokes whenever I edit this. That's easy enough, right? Nothing too crazy with that. Now, shapes, is where you're going to get, a little bit more complicated. Not much, right? Everything that you see here is made up. Actually, we don't even see an S curve in these. We're just seeing either a straight line or a C line, right? An I line or a C line. So you got circles, you got ovals, you got triangles, you got squares, you got a rectangle, you have a trapezoid here, and you've got a rhombus or a diamond, right? And so these are pretty easy, right? There's nothing too crazy about what we're doing with these, right? And so if I wanted to, kind of do, I'll do another version of these. So I'll draw a circle, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but, it's just getting us used to kind of like drawing these kinds of forms, right? Boom. Okay, got an oval. Ovals can go that way, or they could go this way, right? Either or. Triangles. This one here is an equilateral triangle. So you guys try and follow along, try and draw what I'm doing in red, right? Nice little equilateral triangle. You know, there's obviously you know, other kinds as well, but whatever. What is it? Isosceles and then right triangles, right? Do I remember my geometry lessons? Probably not. Square, which is just a very specific kind of rectangle with sides that are all the same size, right? So if we do a rectangle, it would look like that. Square looks like that. You don't have to worry about doing these all super fancy or nice. I just kind of want you to get used to the idea of drawing shapes. Okay? Trapezoid. Trapezoid always makes me think of Freakazoid. Do you guys remember that show from the 90s on WB? I think it was WB, right? And then a rhombus, which is like a diamond. I remember Freakazoid, right? There you go. So we got some shapes, right? And a lot of the things that we see are just going to be, you know, variations of these different kinds of shapes, right? And so if you can draw these, then you can draw some pretty basic stuff, right? And we can take, you know, a lot of the main structures of some bigger, possibly more daunting things, and turn it into these shapes so that we can kind of recreate them a little bit easier. And so that's what we're going to be working on today. That's my idea. That's what I'm talking about when I say breaking things down, right? So I'll show you some examples first, and then we're going to work on them together. Now, here we go. Now, again, if we look at this by itself, it's almost kind of like whenever we were looking at the Mona Lisa a second ago, right? We're like, oh, there's so much. There's so much going on here. There's a bird. It's got all these, like, freaky talons, all these different wings, all these different feathers. He's got his little beak and beady little eyes. Yeah, it's like a little cream puff, right? There's a lot going on here. But can we simplify it? Can we break it down? Yes. Now, is it going to look picture perfect? Probably not. We're still learning. I'm still learning. I'm not a realism artist, right? But if we take a look at it, like, there's some pretty simple shapes that are being created, right? And you just have to be able to keep your eyes open and figure out, how am I going to break this down into simple parts? And so we see, for as far as like the major structure of this, like there's a big circle that takes up the big core chunk of it. There's another circle that takes up the head. The beak is a nice little easy triangle. The wings kind of come down in a triangle-y kind of shape here. There's kind of like a really elongated, stretched out, I was gonna say for art class, a really elongated, stretched out trapezoid here. And then the legs are kind of more or less sticks with little triangles coming off of them. And so, you know, we're looking at this thing, and we're like, oh, well, that's not as complex. I mean, like, it obviously is complex, but I can draw circles, triangles, a trapezoid, no problem, right? And so can you. And so can you, right? So that's an idea. We're going to come back to this, but this is what I mean when I say we're breaking things down. When you look at it like this, it's a lot more daunting. Like, where do I start? Where do I start? I have no idea. But again, break it down. A lot more simple to break it down this way, right? Okay, so same idea. And it applies also to, you know, like drawn animated kind of things, right? I'm sure that a lot of people that, you know, are interested in drawing. I know for me, whenever I was first interested in drawing, I was like, I want to be able to draw, you know, Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon and Power Rangers and like all this other kind of stuff. It's a lot more of like an animated kind of thing. Same stuff applies. And honestly, most of the time it's easier to identify these simpler shapes within you know, like cartoons and stuff like that, right? So here we have kind of like mostly circular, but a little bit of an oblong, you know, kind of oval going on, a bunch of triangles, a bunch of trapezoids, and that's about it. You know, obviously we're gonna round out some of the shapes, right? Like it's not exactly like this shape right here isn't exactly a trapezoid. You know, there's a little bit of like curvage happening, you know, here, but you know, the main idea of it is like, yeah, that's a trapezoid. That's the basis of the shape. So you just use small shapes because it's just like, I don't know. For me, I think it's a lot like in life in general, right? Like the world is a daunting and scary place when it comes to like the biggest idea of like, I want to be a better person. That's a huge goal. That's a huge, scary, terrifying goal, trying to like figure out how am I going to accomplish that, right? But you know how you do that is you break it down into little smaller parts. You know, being a better person is a little bit is a little big, it's a little vague, right? So I could break that down a little bit for me personally. Like my version of a better person is, well, I want to be better at my artwork, right? And so being a better artist is kind of like a step down, you know, from like being a better person. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's a little bit more manageable, still kind of daunting. How can I break that down further? And then from there, I'm like, well, you know, there's two main ideas that are with that. I have to learn more and I have to practice more. And so from there, I could break it down even further from being a better artist to I want to draw every day and I want to watch more art tutorial videos. Now, those two things are bite-sized. They're not easy, but they're a lot more manageable than be a better person. Instead, I have draw every day and watch art videos. That's a lot more viable. I could do that for sure, you know? So that is what I'm talking about whenever I'm talking about breaking things down. It's the same idea with art as it is with life. You just want to take kind of these larger, loftier, grand ideas and you break them down into bits and pieces that are a lot more digestible. If everyone has their art utensils out now, remember all you need is either a pencil, maybe a crayon, a colored pencil, whatever. Lightly, you're going to get your piece of paper and you're going to break this thing down to the shapes that I mentioned, right? And so the shapes that I mentioned would probably be a good way to break this thing down. We got like a circle here for like the core of this little critter here, right? Let me do that. We've got another circle that is good for like the head. We've got a triangle for the beak. Got a triangle for the wings. We got like a really stretched out trapezoid up here, and then we essentially kind of have just like sticks going on for the legs, right? And so that's not bad at all, right? I mean, you could draw that, right? You absolutely can draw that. I don't care who the you are, you can draw that, right? So let's do that. Let's do that together, right? So let me put that at a lower opacity here. Okay. So lightly, unless you have digital, in which you can just do it on different layers. Enjoy your lurk, Ellis. So we're gonna start with a circle, right? So we got kind of like a circly, kind of ovally shape, right? And if it's not perfect, don't worry about it, right? This is our sketch layer. You can f with this as much as you want. It's not a big deal, right? My sketches are normally very scratchy like this, and that's fine. You know, whatever works, whatever works. Enjoy your lurk, Ruby. Okay. And then we're going to do a circle, kind of on top of that. That's going to represent the head, right? So you've got kind of the head. You see that it's a little bit like offset, right? Because the head is kind of like leaning forward a little bit, right? So you got a head, and you got a head that's like about yay big, And if you get it down pat the first time, fantastic. If you don't, whatever. Like don't sweat it. I'm sure it's gonna be fine. Okay. From the head, you have a little triangle coming off of it, like so. Okay. Yeah. And then from the body, we're gonna have a triangle as well. We see this body here, right? And if we're looking at the figure, and the triangle that I'm talking about is like the triangle that this wing makes here. And in comparison to the body, it starts like part of the corner of the triangle starts like just a little bit below the center part of the circle of the circle of its like core being right there, of its ethical Kantian soul there. So we can kind of have that corner piece right there, right? And then, you know, it kind of goes up here, and it's gonna go off of the body a little bit, right? So it's about yay, there, like that. Okay, so there we have a wing, nice and fancy. Then out of the corner bottom part of it is where we have kind of like that weird trapezoid shape that's going on with that tail feather, right? There we go. And then with the legs, Now, it's important to kind of take a look and see like what the angles are, right? And so for me to figure out the angle of something, it's always good to like have an idea of like where it goes from like a straight line, right? Because if you compare it to a straight line, you could be like, okay, that's how far off I need to angle it, right? So this one is at about like what, maybe a 45-degree angle. This one is maybe about halfway between that, so like a 22.5 maybe, probably even less. So the legs, I can put one out like about yay. I can put one about yay, right? So now we have an idea of where those are going to be. And then I can kind of just put out some little feet lines here. So there we go. We have the framework for this bird. Now, is this perfect? No, right? It's not going to be a perfect look because it's not. It's never going to be perfect unless you actually like trace it, right? If I kind of like shrink this so it's about the same size and angle, it's close, but it's not perfect, right? And that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking to make art. So now that we have this kind of simple thing, what we can do, and again, you guys, if you're doing this with traditional media, you guys should have been doing this with, one, using the image that I just sent you over in Discord as your reference, and then two, lightly, right? Very lightly. Now that we have this, we can kind of use this as a guideline so that we can kind of, draw and have a better look and feel of whatever it is that we're doing, right? So if I'm looking at this, I can look at, I'm still going to be looking at the picture for reference, right? But, I can puff it out just a little bit further, and I can just kind of like follow along using the guidelines that I just created, right? To draw out what this critter looks like. And so I'm just looking over there. I have my eyes kind of trained to dart back and forth between what I'm drawing and what I'm looking at. What I'm drawing, what I'm looking at, drawing, looking at. So I'm gonna keep kind of doing that, and I'm just kind of like following along with what I'm working on, right? And I'm using my framework, right? The bare bones, the skeleton, more or less, that I have created of this bird, and that's what's kind of helping me dictate where I'm putting all of the different features that I'm seeing on this little burb. Okay? And again, like I said at the beginning, don't expect any museum quality things from what you're working on. Don't expect museum quality things from what I'm working on, right? We are learning. We are practicing. We are trying to figure out the best way to do this so that we can apply this technique to other things in the future, right? What you make in a classroom setting isn't necessarily, honestly, probably never going to be like your best kind of stuff. Your best work is whenever you've put in time in a classwork setting, you've put in time in a practice setting, a bunch, and then you and then you use that and you utilize that for everything else that you're working on. Now, here's something interesting, right? The sketch layer is there's like a big gap here because we kind of broke it down to like these two circle kind of shapes, right? And this one, is a circle shape here and then a circle shape here. So we have this big gap, right? And so you're just going to follow along looking at your reference as best as you possibly can, right? And you can kind of see, oh, okay, so it kind of comes down and then it goes, there's like, it kind of fills in a little bit of this gap, right? You kind of see a little bit of like the feathers and the flesh and the meat kind of hanging off here. And then it comes to a point and then it drops back down. And we're just going to kind of follow that and let it do its thing, right? There we go, right? Okay, and then now we can kind of see also the feathers here kind of meet this weird trapezoid shape, and so we're going to do that. Now, something that I've already noticed is that I made my trapezoid shape kind of come in at a weird angle that isn't entirely accurate, and that's the nice thing about sketches is that they're sketches, and so you could with them and you can tweak them as you can edit them as much as you need to, right? So this one here, I could probably scoot this over. Now I could do this because I have I'm using digital media. If you're not using digital media, you're gonna have to use your eraser, a little bit, but that's okay. Or just sketch a little bit more, either or, right? And then this little fuzzy part here is just kind of like where the butt feathers kind of meet that tail feather. And then now we're at the tail feathers, so we can draw the tail feathers. And if we want to get a little fancy, we want to kind of imitate the tail feathers, we can kind of try and draw, you know, a similar shape as to what we're seeing on the image. If you want to keep it nice and simple as a little trapezoid shape at the bottom, that's fine too, right? Remember, we're learning, so don't stress too much about whichever one. Just go with what feels right. If you guys are like, where is this image? It is in the Discord in the art room, by the way. The art class with Professor TurtlePig room. Okay. And then from here, I can kind of trace the outer edges of this leg, right? We got these cute little bird stick legs here. Now, if I look here, there's a little bit of some more complexity here, right? So we just drew them as sticks, but then at the end of the sticks, we have these kind of like curved things. Now, luckily, we can draw a talon, right? Because we learned how to do what? A C line. And a C line, if we do 2 C lines, that is a talon. You stick those motherfuckers at the end of, you just stick them at the end there, and you've got yourself a talon, right? So at the end of our kind of like stick section, we can put, you know, a little talon. So we come here, we got our stick, right? Got our little rectangle-y kind of shape here. And then we can stick a talon at the end of it by just doing 2 sea lines. Boom. Not 2 sea lions, to clarify. I don't expect you to draw a sea lion every time that you're trying to draw a bird. Right? But essentially, we're just going in and we're just adding in those curves at the end. So we have that, and so like that's how you get these more complex things, right? You break them down into simple things, and then you add complexity as you go along, right? So our first level of complexity was just going to be that, just going to be adding in. Just drawing in those really basic shapes. And now that we're kind of getting into a prettier level of the sketch, you know, we can really go in and start adding in some of those details back into our piece, right? And so now, you know, we have something that's a lot, you know, that has a lot more structure, right? And looks closer to our final product than where we started, which was nothing, right? So if I take away my guidelines there, we got a little burb. We can add in some colors, make them look a little bit prettier, make them look nicer. But here we have a bird. We can look at that and say, hey, that's a bird. That's a bird right there. And that's awesome. And that's great, you know? Now, is this the prettiest bird I've ever drawn in my life? Hell no. It sure the isn't. It sure the isn't. But that's okay. That's okay, right? The whole point of this was to draw and to learn the process of breaking something down into simpler pieces and then being able to build it back up from that, right? It's like yeah. So let me hold here for a bit, get some drinks, and then we're gonna do the same thing with that Gengar. All right, guys. So now that we've done our bird, if you guys are still working on it, keep working on it. Well, we're going to transition over into working on Gengar now. All right. So we got Gengar here. For those of you guys that don't know, Gengar is a Pokemon. And he was part of the original 150 that I grew up with because I'm an old man. So Gengar, like we said before, like there's a lot of like pretty clear, like easy to identify shapes here, right? The big one obviously is going to be this big old oval right here. I know you guys can't trace, and that's why I'm gonna do it like you guys will in a second, but I just kind of want to like remind you of where the shapes are. And then as far as like the basic shapes, we see a trapezoid here, triangle here, a bunch of little triangles here. Triangle there, that's his tail coming from the back. It's not a you have a trapezoid here, and then kind of like a semicircle here. And those are like the basic shapes that really like jump out. If you want to include the shapes in his face as well, you have a semicircle here, a semicircle here, and then kind of a crescent shape. A crescent shape, this is essentially like the bottom part of an oval, and then the bottom part of another oval on top of it, and that's kind of what makes that shape. So nothing that we're drawing right here is out of the realms of your capabilities. You can draw ovals, you can draw triangles, you can draw trapezoids, you can draw a semicircle. We can draw Gengar. You just can, right? You just can. So let's do it. Let's draw a Gengar, shall we? So again, lightly, right? We are going to, and to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to rotate this so that he's more or less right side up. You guys, if you're looking at it from a screen, obviously it's going to be a little bit different, but unless you just take your phone and you kind of like rotate it a little bit, right? But so I'm going to draw, I have a nice little oval, more Ovaltine, please. Got him. Bamboozled. Bazinga. Right, so we got ourselves a nice little oval here, right? It's got those two big ears, going out to the side. And like I said before, understanding angles is going to be an important part for mimicking some things, right? So essentially, when I'm trying to figure out, like, how am I going to draw these ears, like, I normally try and just compare it to what either a straight up and down line or a vertical or a horizontal line, right? And so it looks like it's coming out just about like perfectly at a 45. And then, from here, we have them kind of tapered off in other directions there. So if you're trying to get like really nitpicky with it, that's one way to do it, is to line it up with a piece of paper or something else with a straight edge, so that you can kind of figure out. If you're just eyeballing it, just try and kind of like do what I just did, but in your head. But if you have something to compare it to, that's one way that you can do things. That's an entire lesson on its own, which we've done before, but I will probably do again in the future. I will actually probably do it only 1 or 2 lessons after this. But yeah, that's an important skill, I think, is learning how to refer to different things, right? Cool. I might run out of room a little bit, but that's okay. So we have a trapezoid coming out over here to the side, and if your piece doesn't look exactly like it or like mine, whatever, man. We're learning. It's okay. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. We're doing our best, right? Okay, and then we got another trapezoid coming out over here to the side. Bam, right? And if you want to kind of draw in some of the little triangle shapes that we have going on here, you can do that, right? Some of the smaller details I sometimes leave out. It's not as big of a deal, but you can if you want to put it on there. The semicircles on the eyes for the eyes. You can do that. You can kind of get some of that action going on. And if something doesn't look right, you're at the sketch layer, so fix it. Right? The sketch layer is perfect for that because you're not finished with anything. That you're drawing softly, whatever. It's all good. And you can kind of get that semicircle action going on, right? So we kind of have like it's more like a semi-oval, right? The bottom half of an oval, and then the bottom half of a slightly stretched out oval right underneath that, right? So you can already see Gengar taking shape. He's already starting to look, like the Gengar that we know and love. I kind of want that mouth to be open a little bit wider, so I'm gonna open that up just a bit more. Okay, one of his legs is kind of tucked up underneath him, and that's kind of making this little semicircle action here. And then there's also some stuff coming down at the bottom there, so I'm gonna put a little rectangle at the bottom there to signify that. He's got his little piece hanging out here, joking, that's his tail. And then we have kind of like a trapezoid kind of action going on here, like so. Right? And so here we have the basics of a Gengar. And like, does this look like Gengar right now? A little bit, but like no, right? It's not quite there, but it's the base idea of it is absolutely there, right? You can identify Gengar features out of what we've done so far, and that's great. I'm gonna clean them up a little bit because there's some parts that I don't like the sketchy part here for the leg isn't as high as I want it to be, and you don't have to be as nitpicky as me about this. And also sometimes going off of the reference, is kind of nice because you have some levels of individuality with the piece. Now, granted, if you're trying to go for an exact replica, then you're gonna want to go as close as you can, but it's up to you, right? Now that we have the basic things down, we can kind of go in and start working on, like the line work. So I'm gonna get started on that. If you're not here yet, not a big deal. Keep working on what you're doing. and just get to it whenever you get to it. Okay, but just like I was doing before, I'm going to try and make sure that I am kind of like darting my eyes back and forth between my piece and then the reference, right? And so I'm just kind of looking back and forth to make sure that I have, you know, a similar kind of thing going on here, right? We're drawing ourselves cute little Gengar. Gengar is one of my favorite Pokemon. That is why I picked him for this. Gengar, Psyduck, Lickitung, all Gen 1s because that's the one that I knew the most. I think that they are so cute, which is funny because none of those are fighting types, which fighting types are my favorite like type of Pokemon, but I love those three. Those three are so silly and goofy to me. And so I'm just kind of following along as best as I can. And, you know, whenever there's opportunities to kind of like follow along with my with the guide that I have, you know, with my what is it called? My blueprint. And so any of the spots where I'm like not quite sure, I just refer back to my blueprint. I'm like, okay, well, how did I do it there? I'm just trying to like follow along with that so that we have like that nice structure. Because if you're happy with the structure of your blueprint, use your blueprint whenever you do your final lines, and you will be happy with the structure of your final product. If you're not happy with the structure of your blueprint, don't start working on your final product yet. You know, if you are happy with the structure of your blueprint and you're not happy with the structure of your final product, you didn't follow along with the structure of your blueprint then is what happened, right? So yeah, it's just one of those things where like having a good plan will ultimately help you out in the end, right? So get your plan, measure twice, cut once, right? So get your prep ready as best as you possibly can, and that'll set you up for a successful piece. Okay, so now this is an interesting one because the shape is a little bit different, right? Like we simplified it to a trapezoid, but it's not exactly a trapezoid. It's kind of rounded off on some bits, and that's fine, right? Gengi, yeah, Gengar's cute as hell, man. Sir Fetched has an onion sword. Is that a euphemism or? No, that's the evolved form that is in the British area, right? From Pokemon Sword and Shield. Well, Farfetch carries around a leak, right? So I mean, yeah, that's not a difficult leap to make, I don't think, right? I mean that fits. He just sharpened his leek into a sword. Yeah, I saw that. Terrible. It was an awful TikTok. And there we go. We got ourselves a little Gengar. Oh, he's cute. He's super cute. So that's the basic idea of what we're working on here, right? Like a whole idea of what it is that we just did today was to get you used to the idea of looking at something and not getting overwhelmed and saying, "Oh my God, that's so complicated. How in the world are we going to do that?" You can obviously still be amazed and impressed with what people are doing, and in fact, I highly recommend you do. If you're not looking at artists that are better than you, you're not going to learn. You know, so keep looking at artists that are better than you at what they're doing, right? But that's not to say that you should be like disheartened completely by everything that you see. You can, automatically once you start looking at what they do, you're like, okay, how did they do that? How can I do that? And like you really start trying to like noodle your head around, some of the techniques that they're doing, because like all art, all creation in general is built upon the shoulders of the people that came before, right? So, like, definitely use other people as inspiration, 100%. Use the skills, the talents that other people have, use that as inspiration to make yourself a better artist, right? And so by looking at, different things in nature or looking at what other people are making, think about, okay, how would I draw that, right? Start just as a practice, whether you end up drawing it or not, just as a mental practice, how would I draw that, right? And I think that is a worthwhile thing to do, and it's a fantastic thing whenever you're learning how to draw to, be able to really kind of like get your head in the right space for how am I going to create different kinds of things. So I'm just adding a little bit of color to this. Obviously, you don't have to do this. We're really just focusing on kind of like the line work and the composition of things. I'm just doing this just for fun while you guys are working. But yes, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys are not finished working, keep working on it. I would love to see what you guys got. It doesn't have to be right now. You can just post it into the Discord chat whenever you have it finished. But yeah, I hope you guys had fun with art class with Professor Turtlepig. Again, today's lesson was breaking things down. And so it's an important skill. It's an important skill. It's an important first skill to be able to do.